They broke you. They took everything. You trusted them, and they betrayed you. Now you sit in the ruins of your own life. But listen closely. The most dangerous men on earth are not born with power. They are forged in absolute destruction. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He knew that total collapse is the exact blueprint to build an unstoppable king. This is not cheap motivation. This is not a comforting lie to make you feel better. There is no background music here. These are 7 surgical truths to weaponize your pain. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. Look at the modern man when he experiences a devastating loss. His empire crumbles. His heart is betrayed. And what is his first instinct? He talks. He bleeds his emotions onto anyone willing to listen. You are desperate to be heard. Desperate to be validated. Desperate to explain your side of the story to people who have already committed to misunderstanding you. You think that by explaining your pain, you will magically extract sympathy from a ruthless world. You believe that if you just present the flawless logic of your innocence, your enemies will suddenly respect you. This is a catastrophic miscalculation. When you complain, you are exposing your neck to the blade. Every grievance you air, every excuse you make, and every emotional outburst you allow is ammunition you are willingly handing over to your enemies. You are giving them the exact blueprint of your vulnerabilities. Every time you open your mouth to defend yourself against a calculated disrespect, you instantly lower your own status. You subconsciously elevate them to the throne of the judge, and you reduce yourself to the pleading child. You surrender your crown the very second you ask for their understanding. Machiavelli understood the primal nature of human dynamics. He knew that the world does not reward suffering, it punishes it. Men are not moved by your pity, they are moved by your power. Pity is the closest relative to disgust. When you over-communicate, you strip away your armor. You remove your mystery. You become an open book, entirely predictable. And a predictable man is a man waiting to be destroyed. To become an unstoppable force, you must forge a new relationship with silence. You must learn to use silence not merely as an absence of noise, but as a suffocating, undeniable presence. When they betray you, when they attempt to humiliate you, when they expect you to shatter and rage, give them absolutely nothing. Look right through them. Starve their ego. Silence is an absolute weapon of psychological destruction. Human beings cannot handle a void. When you refuse to react, you force them to project their own deepest insecurities into that emptiness. Your silence makes them doubt their own sanity. They will stay awake wondering what you know. They will panic, wondering what you are planning. Your absolute lack of emotional reaction becomes an inescapable mental prison for them. Mastering this requires a ruthless, violent discipline. It requires you to execute the fragile, needy part of your ego that screams for immediate justice. Let them have their pathetic little assumptions. Let them whisper in the shadows. Let them believe whatever false narrative makes them feel safe. Their opinions have zero jurisdiction over your reality unless you grant them permission. By withholding your words, you are revoking their access to your mind. You become the sole architect of your kingdom, completely untouched by the chaos they attempt to orchestrate. From this definitive moment forward, your tongue is a caged beast. You only release it when the words serve a cold, calculated purpose. No more venting to weak friends. No more emotional bleeding on the internet. No more explaining your grand vision to peasants who cannot see past the dirt under their feet. Let your relentless execution make the noise. Let your heavy absence be felt. Let your dead silence crush their disrespect. The man who controls his tongue controls the entire battlefield. Drop Silent King if you understand. Let's keep going. Lesson 2. Predictability is a death sentence. To be easily read is to be easily destroyed. Look at how the average man navigates his life. He is desperate to be seen, desperate to be understood, desperate to prove his worth to people who do not care about him. He announces his grand plans to the world. He telegraphs his emotional state. He reveals his next move before his foot even leaves the ground. This is not ambition. This is the behavior of prey. A prey animal operates in the wide open, making noise, hoping the herd will validate its existence. But the predator operates differently. The predator moves in absolute darkness. The predator strikes from the blind spot. The predator understands that the unknown is the most terrifying force in nature. When people know your patterns, they own you. They know exactly what insults will break your composure. They know exactly what promises will buy your loyalty. They know exactly how to trigger your rage, your fear, and your fragile ego. Your transparency is a catastrophic error. By showing your hand, you are giving them the exact blueprint to engineer your downfall. They will lay traps perfectly tailored to your predictable reactions. Your open, trusting nature will be weaponized against you, leading to your absolute destruction. To survive and conquer, you must master the art of concealment. You must violently sever the connection between your internal thoughts and your visible actions. Stop explaining your strategy to people who are not building with you. Stop warning your enemies before you strike. When they expect fury, give them chilling, dead calm. When they expect passivity, strike with devastating precision. When they think they have finally cornered you, evaporate completely and rewrite the rules of the battlefield. You must become a psychological void that absorbs their assumptions and reflects absolutely nothing back. Let them exhaust their minds trying to anticipate you. Let them drive themselves insane trying to decode your next step. When you hide your true intentions, you hold all the leverage in every single interaction. You force them to walk through the dark, paranoid and terrified, while you see everything with absolute clarity. Never let them see the blade until the cut is already made. An unpredictable man is an untouchable man. Drop Ghost to seal this lesson. Let's keep going. Lesson 3. Worship ruthlessness and kill your pity. Is your forgiveness feeding the exact people who want to destroy you? Look closely at the ruins of your past. You have spent years handing out second chances to individuals who calculated your destruction the first time. You excuse their blatant disrespect. You rationalize their calculated betrayals. You bleed yourself completely dry trying to heal broken people who are actively tearing your foundation apart. You have been conditioned to believe that this infinite patience makes you a righteous man. You call it empathy. You call it unconditional love. But let us dissect the truth with a surgical blade. It is not empathy. It is pure, unadulterated weakness. You are terrified of isolation, so you disguise your cowardice as moral superiority. Machiavelli understood the fatal flaw of human sentimentality. He stated that men are less hesitant about offending someone who makes himself loved than someone who makes himself feared. Love is held together by a chain of obligation that men, being selfish, break whenever it serves their purpose. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment that never fails. When you operate exclusively out of pity, you hand your enemies the ultimate weapon of mass destruction against your own life. They study your tolerance. They know that no matter how devastating their betrayal is, you will eventually negotiate with your own boundaries. They realize your threats are entirely hollow. To rise from the ashes of your old life, You must undergo a violent mental shift. You must elevate ruthlessness to a sacred art form. This does not mean becoming a chaotic tyrant. True ruthlessness is cold, deliberate, and entirely defensive. It requires the catastrophic execution of your own sentimentality. You must violently assassinate the desperate child inside you who begs for harmony at the cost of your own respect. If a person does not add to your empire, they are actively plotting its collapse. There is no middle ground. There is no neutral territory. Does their presence make you sharper? If the answer is no, you do not sit down for a diplomatic conversation. You do not write a long, emotional paragraph explaining your departure. You simply amputate the infected limb before the poison has a chance to reach your heart. You must stop playing the savior to those who enjoy drowning. No more bargaining with deliberate disrespect. No more attempting to rehabilitate traitors. No more dragging the dead weight of toxic attachments into the pristine blueprint of your future. When someone shows you they are willing to compromise your peace, you must look at them and feel an absolute, chilling void. Empathy for a predator is an irreversible death sentence for the prey. You cannot conquer your reality if you are constantly turning back to resurrect the exact people who dug your grave. Protecting your throne requires a heart of stone toward those who seek to exploit it. Compassion is a privilege, not a universal right. Ruthlessness is not cruelty. It is the absolute, uncompromising preservation of your empire. A king who cannot swing the sword will inevitably be slaughtered on his own throne. Drop ruthless to seal this lesson. We are halfway there. Do not look away. Lesson 4. Forge your empire from the ashes. Total destruction is not a punishment. It is a purification. When your life collapsed, you thought you lost everything. You mourned the relationships that vanished, the money that evaporated, and the status that was violently stripped away from you. You are looking at the wreckage through the eyes of a victim. Open your eyes to the brutal reality of the modern world. We exist in a hyper-competitive, unforgiving machine. The financial markets, the social hierarchies, the relentless capitalist arena do not care about your sob story. They only respect absolute leverage and undeniable power. The collapse of your previous life was not a tragedy. It was a harsh, necessary eviction from a structure built entirely on sand. You were operating on a flawed blueprint, surrounded by parasites masquerading as allies. The fire that burned your world to the ground did not destroy you. It simply burned away your illusions. Now you stand in the ashes. This is the most terrifying, yet absolute most powerful position a man can ever occupy. You have zero false hope left. You have no fake loyalty to maintain. You have no fragile ego left to protect. Machiavelli taught that a wise prince must rely on what is in his own power, not on what is in the power of others. You must now become the cold, calculating architect of your new reality. You do not rebuild the same fragile house just to let them burn it down again. You construct an impenetrable fortress. You weaponize your isolation to acquire brutal, undeniable competence. You focus obsessively on acquiring resources. You build wealth not for luxury, but because, in this savage hierarchy, capital is the armor that keeps the predators away from your throne. You must sever your emotional attachment to the ruins. Stop wishing for the old days. Stop negotiating with the ghosts of your past. Stop mourning a life that was destined to fail. They thought breaking you would keep you permanently on your knees. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of an unstoppable force. They did not realize they were handing you the exact raw materials needed to construct your empire. Every insult they threw is a brick. Every calculated betrayal is the mortar. Every night of agonizing pain is the forge that hardens the steel of your new kingdom. You are no longer a participant in their pathetic games. You are the sole creator of a new domain, where you dictate every law. The fire that was meant to consume you is the exact fire you will use to forge your crown. Only a fool fears the ashes. The king uses them to build. Drop architect to seal this lesson. Let's keep going. Lesson 5. Stop seeking loyalty. Create irreversible dependency. You have been brainwashed by fairy tales of unconditional allegiance. You walk through this brutal world, believing in the myth of unbreakable brotherhood and self-sacrificing love. You think that because you bled for someone, because you compromised your own vision to elevate them, they are permanently bound to you by some invisible moral debt. You expect them to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the darkest trenches simply because you stood in theirs. This is not nobility. This is sheer, suicidal delusion. You must swallow a jagged, unforgiving pill about human nature. Human beings are entirely, relentlessly driven by self-interest. They do not stay because they love your soul. They do not stay because they respect your past sacrifices. They stay because your current existence is highly convenient for their personal survival. The absolute second your utility expires, the absolute second a more lucrative opportunity presents itself, the absolute second their primal desires diverge from your path, they will abandon you. And they will rationalize their betrayal so quickly they will not lose a single fraction of sleep over your destruction. You have experienced this collapse before. You gave them your absolute loyalty, and they repaid you with catastrophic betrayal. Machiavelli stripped away the romanticized garbage of human connection and exposed the cold mechanics of power. He knew that relying on the fluctuating, unstable emotions of other people is a fatal vulnerability. Loyalty is a temporary chemical reaction in the brain. It is fragile. It is easily corrupted. And it is entirely out of your control. Dependency, however, is a hardwired biological imperative. If you want absolute control over your empire, you must aggressively terminate your desire to be loved. You must seamlessly transition into making it entirely impossible for them to function without your presence. You must become the solitary architect of a resource they desperately, feverishly need, whether it is exclusive financial access, irreplaceable specialized knowledge, or an unshakable emotional stoicism they cannot find anywhere else in the world. You must position yourself as the vital oxygen to their lungs. Make yourself the bottleneck of their success. But here is the most ruthless rule of all. You never give them the complete formula. You never teach them everything you know. You never hand over the master keys to your kingdom. You give them exactly enough instruction to execute your vision, exactly enough resources to feel secure under your shadow, but never enough power to survive independently. If you make them entirely self-sufficient, you are actively funding your own assassination. You are weaponizing them against yourself. Let them rely entirely on your intellect. Let them depend heavily on your connections. Let them lean on the infrastructure you built from the ashes. You must construct a psychological and practical environment where walking away from you means stepping into total but irreversible darkness. This is not about petty tyranny. This is about establishing an absolute, undeniable leverage that guarantees your unshakable position at the top of the food chain. When they cannot eat without sitting at your table, you never have to beg for their allegiance. You own it completely. Love changes with the wind. But survival is a universal law. Drop mastermind to seal this lesson. We are almost at the final lessons. Stay with me. Lesson 6. Execute emotion in fatal decisions. When a sudden crisis hits, when the bank account drains to zero, when the marriage abruptly shatters, when the empire you spent decades building is violently ripped away, the average man instantly surrenders to his biology. He allows terror to hijack his nervous system. He panics. He makes frantic, desperate moves. He begs for mercy from a world that does not care. And he makes catastrophic choices driven entirely by fear and despair. He subconsciously believes that his intense emotional reaction proves he is taking the situation seriously. He is entirely wrong. In the middle of a brutal collapse, panic is not a natural human response. Panic is absolute suicide. Machiavelli understood that the ultimate test of a ruler is not how he governs in the luxury of peace, but how he calculates in the middle of a slaughter. He knew that a true king must possess the unnatural ability to sever his emotional circuitry the exact moment his world catches fire. Emotion is a blinding fog. It distorts the reality of the battlefield. It makes you hallucinate false, comforting hopes, and it makes you magnify phantom threats. When you react with rage, grief, or terror, you are willingly tying a blindfold over your own eyes while your enemies are aiming their arrows at your chest. To survive a fatal blow, you must ruthlessly execute your own feelings before they execute you. You must train yourself to view your life not as a personal, heart-breaking tragedy, but as a cold, mathematical chessboard. When the storm hits, you do not cry out to the heavens. You do not mourn the extreme unfairness of your reality. You detach completely. You step outside of your own body, and you look at the smoking wreckage with the chilling, emotionless indifference of a forensic scientist. What are the tangible remaining assets? Where are the immediate, fatal threats? What is the absolute most logical, ruthless next move to ensure your immediate survival? You must violently kill the fragile part of your brain that wants to process the trauma right then and there. There is no time to bleed. There is only time to maneuver. A man who cannot control his internal climate will always be a helpless victim to the external weather. You must extinguish the urge to panic, extinguish the desire to rage, and extinguish the luxury of grief until the war is definitively won. Let them expect you to break down. Let them eagerly wait for your chaotic, desperate reaction. Give them nothing but a terrifying, absolute stillness. When you face total destruction without a single flinch, the destruction bows to you. A mind stripped of emotion is a weapon of absolute precision. Drop Emotionless King to seal this lesson. Let's finish strong. Lesson 7. The rebirth of the apex predator. Look back at the man you were at the beginning of this journey. That broken, bleeding version of you is gone. He was crushed under the weight of his own naivety. He was devastated by his desperate need for approval. He was destroyed by a world that recognized his weakness and capitalized on it. But that destruction was not the end of your story. It was the necessary, violently extracted toll for your absolute evolution. You have absorbed the silence. You have mastered the unpredictability. You have weaponized your ashes and completely eradicated your pity. You are no longer the prey, hoping the predator will show mercy. You have officially stepped onto the throne. You have rewritten the fundamental laws of your existence. When they look at you now, they do not see a victim. They see an absolute, unshakable force of nature. You have engineered a reality where your presence demands immediate, primal respect. You do not ask for a seat at the table. You own the entire room the second you walk in. You dictate the terms. You control the narrative. You hold absolute leverage in every single interaction because you have successfully killed the only thing that could ever truly defeat you. Your own emotional fragility. Here is the ultimate, terrifying truth for your enemies. You cannot be destroyed a second time. Why? Because you have already survived the absolute worst. You have already walked through the darkest, most agonizing hell they could possibly invent. And you did not burn. You used their fire to forge your crown. They cannot use the threat of abandonment against you. Because you have mastered isolation, they cannot use the threat of ruin against you. Because you know exactly how to rebuild an empire from the dirt, you are immune to their manipulation. You are immune to their panic. You are an entirely self-sustaining ecosystem of power. This is the rebirth. You are no longer navigating their world. They are now desperately trying to survive in yours. The apex predator does not negotiate with the food chain. He dominates it completely. Drop Reborn King to seal this final lesson. Last part, the final truth. Do not make the fatal mistake of believing that absolute power is a final destination. You do not simply arrive at invincibility, sit on the throne, and close your eyes. Becoming untouchable is not a permanent state of grace. It is a brutal, unrelenting, and violent decision that you must make every single day for the rest of your natural life. Every morning when you wake up, the ghost of your former self will attempt to resurrect the desperate child who craves validation, the coward who fears isolation, the weak man who begs to be understood. They will whisper to you from the shadows of your psyche. They will tempt you to soften your edges. They will beg you to compromise your boundaries for the sake of temporary peace. And every single morning, you must look into the mirror and violently execute that weakness all over again. The world will never stop testing the borders of your newly built empire. Society will constantly probe your armor, searching for a single, microscopic crack of sentimentality. If you drop your guard, if you allow the illusion of comfort to make you predictable again, they will tear your kingdom down faster than the first time. Power is never passively held. It is actively enforced through cold, relentless discipline. You now possess the forbidden blueprint. You understand the dark mechanics of total control. You know that silence is your weapon. Unpredictability is your shield. And ruthlessness is your absolute right. The ashes of the man who was broken, the man who was betrayed, the man who was crushed under the weight of his own pity, that man is dead. He has been entirely erased from history. There is absolutely no turning back. You cross this psychological line today, and you commit to the heavy burden of the crown. Drop untouchable in the comments right now. That is your identity from this moment forward.